The dining room froze mid-breath. Crystal glasses hovered inches from polished tables. A violinist's bow stalled in the air. Even the chandelier seemed to stop swaying, its light caught between sparkle and shadow. "Don't you hear me?" The billionaire roared, his voice cracking like a whip across the room. "I said bring me the other bottle. Are you deaf or just stupid?" The waitress stood perfectly still. Her name tag, Mara, glinted against her black apron as if it were trembling. She held the wine cradle with both hands, knuckles pale, eyes steady but glassy. Every instinct in her body screamed to apologize, to bend, to shrink. The room expected it. That's how this usually went. Around them, silk dresses and tailored suits leaned subtly away, like witnesses afraid of catching something contagious. A couple at the next table stared into their bread basket. A man near the window smirked and whispered something to his companion. Someone lifted a phone, then thought better of it. The billionaire leaned back in his chair, spreading his arms wide, performing for the room. "What's wrong?" he sneered. "Cat got your tongue, or do you only understand tips when they're spelled out in dollar signs?" A ripple of uncomfortable laughter moved through the crowd. Myra swallowed. "I brought the bottle you ordered, sir," she said quietly. Her voice didn't shake. That surprised even her. "The bottle I ordered." He barked a laugh and slapped the white linen tablecloth with his palm. "I ordered a 97 Chateau Montclair. This," he jabbed a finger at the label, "is a 99. Do you know the difference, or should I draw you a picture?" Her shoulders lifted with a slow breath. "The sommelier confirmed this pairing with your meal." The billionaire's smile vanished. He leaned forward, eyes narrowing, face flushing red as if insulted by her calm. "Don't correct me," he hissed. "I didn't make my billions by listening to waitresses who can't tell the difference between trash and treasure." A sharp intake of breath rippled through the dining room. Mara closed her eyes for half a second. When she opened them again, something had changed. Not defiance, not arrogance. Resolve. "Sir," she said, setting the wine cradle gently on the service stand beside the table, "I can bring you a different bottle if you'd like, but I won't accept being spoken to like that." That's when the billionaire stood up. His chair screeched backward, the sound slicing through the silence. He towered over her, expensive cologne mixing with anger, casting a shadow that swallowed her apron and most of the table behind her. "You won't accept it," he repeated slowly, incredulous. "Do you have any idea who you're talking to?" Mara met his gaze. "Yes," she said, that single word, calm, even hit him harder than any insult. He laughed again, but this time it was sharp and humorless. "Unbelievable, you people are getting bolder by the day." "You people," someone murmured. The violinist finally lowered his bow. The billionaire turned slightly, aware of the attention now fully locked on him, and raised his voice just enough to make sure everyone heard. "Let me make this very clear," he said. "I'm here because this restaurant claims to be the best in the city, and instead I get an attitude from a waitress who thinks she gets to lecture me." Mara felt the familiar heat crawl up her neck. The old reflex urged her to apologize just to end it, to protect her job, to protect her rent, to protect everything hanging by a thread. But today wasn't like other days. She lifted her chin. "Sir," she said, her voice still quiet but now edged with steel, "shout at me again and this ends." The room gasped. A fork clattered to the floor. Someone whispered, "Did she just?" The billionaire stared at her as if she had slapped him. "This ends," he repeated, incredulous. "You think you get to end anything?" He leaned in closer, so close she could see the faint scar along his jaw, the pulse beating in his temple. "You end when I say you end," he said. "I could buy this place, fire you, and forget your name before dessert." Mara didn't step back. Instead, she did something no one expected. She smiled. Not a sweet smile, not a sarcastic one, a knowing smile. For the briefest moment, doubt flickered across the billionaire's face, so fast most people missed it. But it was there, a crack in the armor, because Mara wasn't bluffing, and somewhere deep in his gut he felt it. "Sir," she said softly, "please lower your voice." "Or what?" he snapped. "What are you going to do, spill wine on me?" She shook her head once. "No," the billionaire scoffed. "Then I suggest you walk away before I have management throw you out. I'm being generous." Myra glanced around the room, at the faces watching, judging, waiting for her to be put back in her place. Then her eyes drifted, just for a second, toward the mirrored wall near the bar, toward a man standing there silently. He hadn't moved this entire time, he hadn't spoken, but his gaze never left the billionaire, and if anyone had bothered to look closely, they would have noticed the subtle tension in his posture, the way staff instinctively avoided blocking his view, the discreet earpiece tucked behind his ear. Mara looked back at the billionaire. "Last warning," she said. The billionaire laughed loudly, clapping his hands once. "This is priceless. Please, everyone, enjoy the show." He pointed at her. "You're fired, effective immediately. Get out of my sight." A hush fell so deep it felt like the room itself was holding its breath. Mara slowly untied her apron strings, not with shaking hands, with purpose. She folded the apron neatly, placed it on the service stand, and looked the billionaire straight in the eye. "Very well," she said. And then, before anyone could react, the man by the mirrored wall stepped forward. "Actually," he said calmly, his voice carrying effortlessly across the room, "that won't be happening." Every head turned. The billionaire scoffed without even looking. "And who the hell are you?" The man stopped beside Mara and smiled. "This," he said, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder, "ends now." The billionaire's face drained of color, because in that moment he finally recognized the man standing in front of him. And realized, far too late, that he had just made the biggest mistake of his life. Question of the day: have you ever been judged, disrespected, or humiliated just because of your job or appearance? Tell us your story in the comments, and let us know where you're watching from today. But before we see how this ends, let's go back to where this story truly began. 3 months earlier, Mara's alarm rang at 4:45 a.m. not because she liked waking up early, but because life had never given her the luxury of sleeping in. The sound cut through the small one-bedroom apartment like a blade. Mara's eyes opened instantly, trained by years of responsibility. She lay still for a moment, staring at the faint crack in the ceiling above her bed, listening. Silence. Then soft breathing from the next room. She exhaled in relief. Careful not to make a sound, Mara slipped out of bed and padded across the worn carpet to the open doorway of the bedroom. Her 6-year-old son, Eli, lay curled beneath a faded blue blanket, one arm wrapped around a stuffed dinosaur with a missing eye. His chest rose and fell in slow, even rhythm. Mara smiled despite the heaviness already settling in her chest. "Sleep well, baby," she whispered. She turned toward the kitchen, if you could call it that. A single counter, an aging stove, and a refrigerator that hummed louder than it should. As she brewed cheap coffee, she glanced at the corkboard nailed beside the sink. Past due electric bill. Rent notice, final warning. A scribbled note from her sister: "I'm sorry, I really can't help this month." Mara closed her eyes briefly. It hadn't always been like this. There was a time when her life had looked different, before the accident, before the headlines, before she learned how quickly comfort could vanish. But Mara didn't allow herself to linger there. Looking back hurt too much and didn't pay bills. She dressed quickly, black slacks, white shirt, hair pulled back neatly. The uniform of someone meant to blend into the background. She poured cereal for Eli, kissed the top of his head as he stirred. "I'll see you after school," she said softly. "Promise," he mumbled. "Always." By 5:30 a.m. she was out the door. The city was still half asleep when Mara boarded the bus. Construction workers, cleaners, night shift nurses, people who kept the world running while others dreamed. No one looked at anyone else for too long. Everyone carried something heavy. Mara stared out the window as the skyline slowly emerged, glass towers catching the first hints of dawn. Her stop came too soon. Levine. The name alone intimidated people. A Michelin-starred restaurant tucked inside a historic building, where reservations were booked months in advance and entrees cost more than Mara's weekly groceries. Crystal chandeliers, imported marble floors, diners who spoke casually about private jets and summer homes. It was also the highest-paying job she could find without a college degree, and she needed every dollar. Inside the staff entrance, the mood shifted. The clatter of dishes, the sharp commands from the kitchen, the scent of butter and wine. This world ran on precision and fear. "Mara," the hostess whispered as she passed. "You're on main floor tonight." Mara nodded. "Got it." Main floor meant visibility, big spenders, bigger egos. She tied her apron and checked her reflection in the mirror. Calm face, neutral expression, never react. That rule had kept her employed for nearly a year, despite the comments, despite the hands that lingered too long, despite customers who treated her like furniture. Mara was good at her job. Very good. She memorized preferences, remembered anniversaries, de-escalated tantrums with a soft voice and perfect timing. Management trusted her with difficult tables, but today was different. When she arrived for her shift briefing, the manager, Roland, slick hair, tighter smile, cleared his throat. "We have a special guest tonight," he said. "Mr. Victor Hale." A murmur rippled through the staff. Even Mara stiffened. Victor Hale wasn't just rich. He was legendary, tech billionaire. Investor, known for buying companies on a whim and destroying people who displeased him just as easily. "And before anyone asks," Roland continued, "yes, he's particular, so whoever gets his table needs to be flawless." His eyes drifted around the room, then landed on Mara. You've handled high-profile guests before, he said. You're up. Mara felt a knot tighten in her stomach. Yes, sir. She spent the rest of the day preparing, studying the menu pairings, memorizing Hale's past preferences, practicing responses in her head, because today wasn't just another shift. Today was the day she needed to be perfect. If she lost this job, she didn't just lose income, she lost everything. Her rent was already 2 weeks late. Eli's school had sent a notice about unpaid fees. The electric company had given her one last extension. One. Tonight's tips could mean the difference between staying afloat and sinking for good. She whispered a small prayer as she stepped onto the main floor that evening. Please, she murmured, just let me get through tonight. When Victor Hale arrived, the temperature in the room changed instantly. People noticed. He walked in like he owned the air-tailored suit, confident stride, entourage of silence. Conversations lowered, heads turned. Mara approached with a polite smile. Good evening, Mr. Hale. Welcome to Levine. He didn't look at her. Table, he said. She guided him to the center of the room, the best seat in the house. As she poured water, she noticed the way he scanned the place, cataloging everything like an acquisition. This better be worth the hype, he muttered. Mara nodded. We'll do our best, sir. She couldn't know, that by the end of the night, her life would collide head-on with his in a way neither of them could imagine. What she did know was this: she had walked into that restaurant carrying more than plates and menus. She carried desperation, dignity, and a secret that had been buried for years. A secret that made this day, this exact day, far more dangerous than anyone realized. And as she moved through the dining room, unaware eyes watching her from the mirrored wall near the bar, fate quietly set its pieces into place. Because Victor Hale wasn't just testing a restaurant that night. He was about to test a woman who had nothing left to lose, and everything to reveal. The restaurant was alive with soft clinks of silverware, murmured conversations, and the occasional pop of a champagne cork. Mara moved carefully through the labyrinth of tables, balancing a tray of hors d'oeuvres with the practiced ease of someone who had danced this delicate dance 1,000 times before. Every step, every tilt of the tray was calculated. But tonight, there was a weight pressing down on her chest that made each movement feel heavier. Victor Hale's table sat at the center of the main floor, under a spotlight that seemed unintentional but perfectly designed to make him the sun around which everything else revolved. His sharp eyes tracked Mara as she approached, and she felt the familiar sting of scrutiny, the way he measured every inch of her, as though deciding in a matter of seconds whether she was competent or disposable. Mr. Hale, Mara said, bowing her head slightly as she presented the menu. May I start you with an up? Our sommelier has recommended a vintage Prosecco to complement your dinner tonight. Hale didn't lift his gaze from the menu. I don't drink bubbles, he said, voice cold, precise. I drink what I want. I don't need recommendations from anyone. Mara's lips pressed into a thin line. She had been through this before, high-maintenance customers who believed the world existed to serve their whims. But Hale was different. He carried an arrogance so deep it seemed structural, ingrained into his very being. And yet she had to serve him. One wrong move, one tiny mistake, and the consequences would be catastrophic. I understand, sir, she said, voice even. Would you like the 97 Chateau Montclair with your entree? He finally looked up, eyes narrowing like a predator spotting a new threat. Do you always lecture your guests on wine, or is that reserved for waitresses with attitude? Mara froze for a heartbeat, measuring her next words. I'm simply trying to ensure your experience is as enjoyable as possible. Hale's lips twisted into a smirk, but it didn't reach his eyes. Enjoyable. Let me tell you something, young lady, he said, leaning back in his chair, one leg crossed over the other in a display of casual dominance. Enjoyable is something you don't get if you're dealing with incompetence, and judging by your tone, I can already tell you're going to fail. A ripple of unease moved across the room. Patrons shifted in their seats, servers paused mid-step, all silently witnessing the subtle cruelty. Mara's stomach tightened. She had faced rude customers before, but there was a deliberate sharpness in Hale's words, a targeting that made every syllable feel like a public execution. I assure you, sir, Mara said carefully, I will do everything in my power to make tonight satisfactory. Hale laughed, a low, sharp sound that turned heads. Satisfactory. He repeated, his voice rising just enough to guarantee everyone heard. I didn't come here for satisfactory. I came here for perfection, and if you can't deliver it, well, that's not my problem, is it? She moved to pour his water, hands steady but pulse racing. Hale's gaze followed her movements, critical, scrutinizing. Every flick of the wrist, every tilt of the glass, every step she took was measured against an invisible ruler, one she could never fully reach. "Excuse me," he said suddenly, his voice cutting through the soft background music. "Is this the best you can do?" Mara paused, frozen mid-pour, heads turned. Even the sommelier looked up from his station. She had rehearsed answers for every conceivable question, but not this one, delivered with such cutting disdain. She began, her voice steady despite the fluttering panic in her chest. "I am following the specifications that were requested. If there is another bottle you prefer, I will bring it immediately." Hale slammed a hand on the table, the sound echoing like a gunshot. "Do you hear me?" he barked. "I want the other bottle. Are you deaf or just incapable of listening?" A few tables away, a woman gasped softly, clutching her napkin. A man at the bar chuckled under his breath, and one of the younger servers shifted uncomfortably, hiding behind a tray of glasses. The room seemed to shrink around Mara, walls closing in as all eyes bore into her. She took a deep breath, centering herself. She had faced tough guests before, but something in Hale's presence was different, predatory, merciless, and yet she refused to crumble. "Sir," she said, voice quiet but firm, "I brought the bottle that was paired for your meal. If you'd like me to bring a different one, I will, but I won't accept being spoken to in that manner." The words hung in the air like a bomb. For a brief moment, the room seemed to freeze. Hale's face twitched, a flicker of shock and disbelief crossing his features. No one had ever spoken to him this way. Not employees, not friends, not even business rivals. "You what?" he asked, his voice low, incredulous. "Do you have any idea who you're talking to?" "I do," Mara said, steady as a lighthouse in a storm. The billionaire leaned closer, so close she could see the faint vein along his temple pulsing with anger. "You think you can talk to me like that?" he spat. "Do you know how many people would kill for the chance to serve me? And here you are lecturing me, incredible, truly unbelievable." Somewhere in the back of the room, a fork clattered onto the floor. A child at another table stared wide-eyed, unsure if they were witnessing theater or a real-life nightmare. "I don't need to lecture anyone, sir," Mara replied. "I only ask that you treat people with respect. Shout at me again, and this ends." The words were quiet, almost serene, but the weight behind them was palpable. Hale froze. A ripple of tension spread through the room. For the first time, the billionaire was faced with someone who refused to flinch, someone immune to his intimidation tactics. "This ends," Hale repeated, incredulous. "Do you understand the position you're in? The world doesn't work like this. People like you," he waved a dismissive hand. "You get pushed aside, ignored, and forgotten. And yet here you are telling me how to behave." Mara held her ground, her hands clasped in front of her. "If you raise your voice again, I will leave and I will not come back. That's my choice, sir." The room went silent, every single person holding their breath. The waiter at the next table paused mid-step. The sommelier stopped polishing glasses. Even the pianist stopped playing. Hale's face twisted with disbelief, then rage, then confusion. How could someone so obviously in a vulnerable position, alone, surrounded by witnesses, entirely at his mercy, speak to him with such calm authority? He opened his mouth to respond, but before he could, a shadow detached itself from the mirrored wall near the bar. A man stepped forward, a presence so commanding that the room seemed to shift subtly toward him. Hale's eyes narrowed. "Who?" The man's voice carried clearly, effortlessly over the stunned silence of the dining room. "That ends now." Mara's eyes flicked toward him briefly. Recognition, relief, hard to tell, but something passed between them, subtle but unmistakable. Hale's face went pale, and for the first time that night the arrogance in his eyes wavered, because he had no idea the consequences of what was about to unfold. And Mara, steady, dignified, unflinching, was ready. The room seemed to inhale collectively, a single, suspended breath. Every glass, every fork, every whispered conversation fell away into a tense hush. Victor Hale's eyes darted from Mara to the man who had stepped from the shadows, and then back again. "Who are you?" Hale asked, his voice sharp but uncertain. His usual poise, the arrogance that made him untouchable, faltered. The man smiled, not smugly, not arrogantly, but with a quiet authority that seemed to press against Hale like an invisible weight. "Mara," he said softly, "do you want to handle this or shall I?" Mara's lips curved into a small, calm smile. "Let's let him see the truth," she said. Hale's scowl deepened. "I don't know what game you're playing," he snapped. "I don't have time for—" The man raised a hand, stopping him mid-sentence. Then he gestured toward Mara. "This is my daughter." The words struck Hale like a thunderclap. The room didn't move for a second. Patrons froze, staff froze, even the air seemed to stop. Hale's face went from disbelief to pale shock in a heartbeat. His mouth opened, then closed, then opened again, as if he had forgotten how to form words. My daughter, he repeated, his voice barely audible. Yes, the man said gently but firmly. Mara, who you've been belittling, mocking, and threatening, is my daughter, and if you raise your voice or treat her disrespectfully, again there will be consequences far beyond what you can imagine. Hale's world tilted. He scanned the dining room, the staff, the mirrored wall, as though looking for some trick. This can't be real, he whispered. His confident demeanor, the one that had bulldozed over employees, servers, and even business rivals, was gone. Only a flicker of fear and confusion remained. Mara didn't move. She remained poised, calm, unshaken. The secret she had guarded for years, the one she had hidden beneath late nights, financial struggles, and humility, was now her shield. She had been underestimated her whole life, her worth ignored because she seemed ordinary. But now the truth had come to light. The man beside her, her father, stepped closer. His gaze swept over Hale, piercing and unyielding. "Do you understand the situation you've created?" he asked. His voice was steady, resonant with authority. "You have insulted, humiliated, and belittled someone who is not only my daughter, but also someone whose judgment and character I trust implicitly." Hale stumbled backward slightly, his hands rising instinctively. I didn't know," he stammered. You thought what?" Mara asked softly, her eyes sharp. "That you could humiliate someone in front of dozens of witnesses and walk away unscathed. That respect is something you demand, not something you earn." Hale's lips trembled. For the first time, Mara noticed a flicker of vulnerability, something human in the man whose reputation had been built on dominance and intimidation. The restaurant, still tense and silent, felt the shift. Whispers began to bubble among the guests, all of whom had watched the escalating confrontation with a mixture of fascination and horror. Staff exchanged glances, astonished that a humble waitress, someone they had treated as just another employee, had revealed a truth that rendered the billionaire powerless. Mara's father, towering and composed, nodded once. "You will apologize, publicly, and you will respect my daughter from this moment forward in this restaurant and beyond." Hale's face went white. His usual defenses, the arrogance that had intimidated so many, crumbled as the weight of reality sank in. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, he knelt slightly, the gesture humiliating even to him. I am sorry," he muttered. His voice barely carried over the hush of the room, but everyone heard it. I didn't realize." "You didn't realize," Mara said softly, her eyes locking on his, "because you never stopped to see people. You assumed power and status could make everyone beneath you. Tonight you learned otherwise." The room's atmosphere transformed in a heartbeat. What had been a tense scene of humiliation became a tableau of justice. Patrons sat upright, some applauding quietly. Staff exhaled deeply, the weight of fear lifted. Even the chandelier seemed to sparkle brighter under the new clarity. Hale, still pale and shaken, sank into his chair, a man unmoored. Mara's father placed a hand on her shoulder, a silent signal of support. She took a deep breath, feeling a rush of relief mixed with triumph. Years of quiet endurance, of surviving every insult and injustice, had led to this moment. The sommelier, who had been watching silently from the side, nodded respectfully toward Mara. Even the youngest busboy, usually invisible in the chaos of fine dining, felt the shift and straightened his posture, inspired by her courage. Hale attempted to recover some composure, clearing his throat. I didn't know she was," he began, but Mara cut him off with a steady gaze. "No, Mr. Hale, you did know, you simply didn't care, and that was your mistake." He swallowed hard, the weight of his arrogance finally crashing down. For the first time, he understood that influence, wealth, and status were meaningless without respect for those around him. And tonight, the lesson had been delivered in front of an audience that would not soon forget. Mara turned to her father. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice low but filled with gratitude. He nodded, smiling. "You didn't need me tonight. You stood strong on your own. I'm proud of you." Hale slumped in his chair, words failing him. He had been dethroned, not by money, not by competition, but by the dignity, courage, and presence of a woman he had underestimated from the moment she entered the room. The entire dining room held a collective breath, absorbing the quiet victory. Justice had arrived, not loud, not flashy, but precise and irrevocable. Mara, once invisible and underestimated, now commanded attention simply by being herself. Victor Hale sat frozen at his table, the weight of realization pressing down like a physical force. For the first time in his life, he was entirely exposed, not as a billionaire, not as a titan of industry, but as a man who had misjudged someone in front of dozens of witnesses. The room was silent, save for the soft murmur of relief and excitement that began to ripple through the staff and patrons alike. Mara's father, still standing beside her, finally spoke again, his voice calm but carrying the authority of undeniable truth. Victor, your behavior tonight was unacceptable. You humiliated someone who has devoted herself to excellence and integrity, someone who deserves respect regardless of status. That behavior cannot stand. Hale tried to respond, stammering, I didn't mean. You didn't mean. Mara cut in, her voice steady, clear, and uncompromising. Victor, your intentions are irrelevant. Actions have consequences. The room shifted as one of the restaurant managers stepped forward. Mr. Hale, he said carefully, we cannot allow this kind of conduct in Levine. You will need to leave the premises immediately and the staff affected will be supported. We hold our employees to the highest standards and they deserve a workplace free from intimidation and disrespect. Hale blinked, pale and speechless. No words came easily. He had spent years commanding rooms, buying influence, and bending people to his will, and yet here the combined presence of Mara and her father had stripped him of all power. I see, he whispered finally, voice cracking. The confidence that had allowed him to dominate so many boardrooms, so many dining rooms, evaporated completely. I apologize, truly, Mara nodded slowly. Your apology is noted, Mr. Hale. But understand this, it is the respect you show others that defines your character, not your wealth, not your status, not the brand of your wine. A murmur of agreement moved through the staff, who had been silently watching the scene unfold. Even the most junior servers felt a wave of empowerment. They had witnessed courage in action, and they could now see the value of integrity over fear. The restaurant manager stepped forward again. Victor, the security team will escort you to the exit. Please understand that this is for the safety and dignity of our staff. Hale rose slowly, every muscle tense. He nodded stiffly, unable to meet Mara's gaze for more than a fleeting moment. As he walked toward the exit, heads turned, guests whispered, staff exhaled, and a quiet sense of justice settled over the room. Once Hale was gone, Mara let herself relax, leaning against her father with a small, grateful smile. I thought I might have to leave tonight, she admitted softly. But you gave me courage. Her father shook his head gently. No, Mara, you had that courage all along. I only reminded you and the world what you already knew. Strength isn't in hiding, it's in standing firm even when everyone expects you to falter. Tears pricked Mara's eyes, a mixture of relief, triumph, and exhaustion. I couldn't let him think he could control me anymore, she whispered. And you didn't, her father said. You took control of your life and reclaimed your dignity. That is more valuable than any tip, any table, or any paycheck. The restaurant staff gathered around Mara, some with quiet applause, others with tears glistening in their eyes. The youngest busboy stepped forward, shaking slightly. I've never seen anyone stand up like that before, he admitted. Mara smiled, bending slightly to meet his eyes. It's not about being fearless, she said softly. It's about doing what's right, even when you're scared. Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's choosing to act in spite of it. The sommelier, who had observed the entire confrontation, nodded solemnly. You've changed the entire atmosphere of this place tonight, he said. Not just for the staff, but for everyone who witnessed it. Respect and dignity, that's something that can't be bought, no matter how rich you are. Mara's father gave her a proud, almost imperceptible nod. And that's the lesson he and everyone here needed to learn. Later, when the shift ended, Mara walked through the now empty dining room with her father. She took a deep breath, inhaling the aroma of fine wine and polished wood, a scent that now carried not just the memory of work, but of triumph. You've inspired more than just me tonight, her father said quietly. Every staff member, every guest, they saw what integrity looks like, and trust me, they'll remember it for a long time. Mara nodded, feeling a sense of fulfillment she hadn't known in years. It wasn't the money, the tips, or even the recognition from management. It was the knowledge that she had stood up unapologetically for herself, that she had demanded respect and received it, that she had refused to let fear dictate her actions. Her father placed a hand on her shoulder again. Mara, the world will always test you, but remember this night. Remember that your character is your power. Never let anyone diminish it. She smiled through her tears. I won't, she said. Not ever. Outside, Hale's sleek black car waited. He sat silently, eyes lowered, reflecting on the humiliation and lesson he had endured. A man who had always believed he could bend anyone to his will now realize that some things, integrity, respect, courage, were entirely beyond purchase or manipulation. For Mara, the night had ended with justice, redemption, and a profound affirmation of her worth. The tables had turned, the power had shifted, and the once intimidating billionaire had learned that money and status could never override human dignity. In the quiet aftermath, Mara looked at the skyline, lights glimmering against the dark night. Her heart swelled with a mixture of exhaustion and triumph. She had fought, she had stood firm, and she had won, not with wealth, not with force, but with unwavering courage. And that victory was far sweeter than anything money could buy. 1 year later, Mara's life looked nothing like it had before that fateful night at Levine. Her apartment, once cramped and dimly lit, had transformed into a bright, welcoming space. Natural sunlight spilled through wide windows, illuminating a living room filled with books, photographs, and Eli's laughter echoing off the walls. The quiet dread that had once accompanied each rent notice and overdue bill was gone, replaced with a sense of security Myra had almost forgotten was possible. Eli, now 7, bounded toward her with a soccer ball under his arm. "Mom, come play with me," Myra laughed, a sound of pure joy that felt foreign after so many years of struggle. "Not now, baby," she said, ruffling his hair. "I have work to do." But her work no longer involved catering to the whims of the entitled or fearing the next public humiliation. Mara had used the recognition from that night to pursue a dream she had long put aside, opening a small community cafe that not only served food, but also provided jobs and mentorship for local youth. The cafe, named Steadfast, was thriving. She trained her staff not just in service, but in confidence, teaching them that dignity and respect were as important as skill. And the memory of Victor Hale was no longer one of fear, but a quiet lesson she shared with her employees. "Remember," she would tell them, "wealth and status don't define you. Character does, courage does, and standing up for yourself is never wrong." As she wiped down a counter and prepared for the morning rush, her phone buzzed. A news alert appeared. "Victor Hale issues public apology. Lessons learned about respect and integrity." Mara smiled to herself. Some battles had long-term impact, not just for the people involved, but for everyone who witnessed the courage it took to stand tall. Meanwhile, Hale's life had changed too. While he retained his wealth, his reputation had taken a hit. No longer was he the untouchable figure of corporate legend. His hubris had been exposed, and now he approached business with humility, or at least a cautious awareness of the human beings around him. Not everyone had forgiven him, but the public recognition of his missteps served as a reminder that arrogance carried real consequences. Mara glanced at Eli, who was now carefully setting up chairs for the cafe's morning crowd, taking after his mother's meticulous care and sense of responsibility. She felt a profound sense of gratitude for the struggle that had shaped her, for the courage that had revealed her worth, and for the knowledge that her life had transformed not by chance, but by standing up for herself. She took a deep breath, letting it out slowly, and thought of the lesson she wanted the world to know. No one should ever let fear or intimidation dictate their life. Respect is earned through actions, courage, and integrity, not demanded through wealth or status. And when you stand firm for what is right, the world will notice. Mara smiled at the steady stream of customers entering Steadfast, ready to serve them with the same quiet dignity she had displayed that night. The cafe buzzed with life, laughter, and connection, a testament to perseverance, courage, and the quiet power of character. As the morning sun bathed the room in gold, Mara whispered to herself, This is how it ends, not with fear, not with intimidation, but with respect, love, and life fully reclaimed." She looked out the window at the city skyline, remembering the night that had changed everything. And she knew deep in her heart that no one, not even a billionaire, could ever take that away. True power does not come from wealth, status, or intimidation. It comes from integrity, courage, and the willingness to stand up for what is right. Those who respect others, regardless of circumstance, leave a legacy far greater than money could ever provide. If Mara's story inspired you today, show some love. Like this video, share it with your friends and family, and subscribe to our channel for more real-life stories of courage, resilience, and triumph. Remember, no matter how tough life gets, standing up for yourself and others always matters.